by sitting up all the way, by showing me that you are following along. So like I know Omar really wants to get those points for his team. I know that the entire red team wants to earn those points for their team. Definitely put it on the table. Red still sitting up all the way. Getting to that page 176. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Chapter 23. Without Julia's help, I could never have hoped to be ready. Each afternoon, long after the others had gone, we sat and went over the lines again and again. She taught me not only the words, but their proper reading and what gestures to use. As difficult as this was for me, it must have been doubly difficult for her, having to tutor me in a role she had worked so hard to make her own. A role she had gone through years of disguise and deception to be able to play. And here was I, with no real notion of being a player until a few weeks before, having the part handed to me. Yet she made no complaint. In fact, she was so generous as to tell me that if she had to surrender the part to someone, she was glad it was me. I feel sure, though, that her cheerful acceptance was itself a disguise.
177 if you got lost.
Something in her eyes spoke of sorrow, and in unguarded moments they sometimes shone with tears. I determined then to put every ounce of effort and ability I had into playing the part, so that she would not be disappointed in me. I had no time for apprentices' lessons or apprentices' tasks. Every available moment was spent rehearsing, sometimes under the eye of Mr. Shakespeare or Mr. Phillips, who pointed out my many flaws. For an hour or two each day, I worked with the other players. Only twice did I share the stage with our Hamlet, Mr. Burbage, and only then to work out where I was to move and on what line. He was patient enough with me and my blunders, but he seldom displayed any real warmth or friendliness. That week was a paradoxical one, because I trod the same ground over and over, repeating my lines until they threatened to choke me. Each day seemed endless. Yet, taken as a whole, the week passed with astounding speed. On Wednesday evening, we ferried across the river to rehearse before the Queen's Master of Revels. The performance was a nightmare.
Last paragraph on
The
177 if
stage
you got
was
lost.
half
Remember,
the
if you get
size
lost,
of the
raise your
room,
hand. It's
which
better to let you
drove
know
us
than
to
to find out.
distraction. To add to the confusion, there were all the new properties and painted backdrops our hired men had constructed. Whatever way I turned, I came up against another player or a piece of scenery. My lines, which were not yet securely seated in my brain, flew from it like startled birds.
178 of
To our tiny audience, it must have looked as though we were playing not the tragedy of Hamlet,
Point
but
red
the
all there.
comedy of errors.
Point lime all there.
When at long last we came to the end of it, I had made up my mind
100%.
that my best
Woo!
course
Every team
would
can
be
give
to
themselves
share
5 extra
Ophelia's
bonus
fate.
points. Loving that.
That is, to throw myself over the side of the wherry boat into the Thames and join the rest of the offal there, none of which could be any more putrid than my performance had been. No one else seemed upset, either with the rehearsal or with my part in it. "You needn't look so glum, witch," Mr. Armin said. "A bad rehearsal means a good performance." That makes no sense at all. You may as well say a bad cook makes a good meal. He laughed. "It's true, though. You'll see. Besides, we still have 3 days before the performance." I tried to take some hope from this, but secretly I was wondering how far I could get from London in 3 days. Saturday dawned grey and gloomy, in keeping with my mood. Julia and Sandra tried to cheer me up, but the only thing that might have done the trick was to hear that the Queen had changed her mind and would have the Lord Admiral's men instead. Immediately after the performance of Satyromastics, the company set out for Whitehall on a barge provided by Her Majesty, a gesture not unlike providing the cart to haul a condemned man to the scaffold. Julia was asked to come along and assist behind the scenes, on the condition that she dress as a girl. She refused. But as we were climbing onto the barge, she came running down the landing stairs, clothed in her costume from Love's Labour's Lost, her skirts lifted so high we could see her ankles. She sprang onto the barge and took a place on the railing next to me, flushed and scant of breath and something I had somehow failed to notice before. Quite pretty. "I'm glad you decided to come," I said. I can do with a bit of support. She shrugged casually. You'll be all right without me. Actually, I came along in order to meet the Queen. You lie, I said, and she laughed. I've always thought of Whitehall as being just that, a large hall painted white. But what lay before us was more in the nature of a small walled town. I gawked about me like the greenest country lad as we were escorted to a massive square hall with a lead roof and high arched windows. Within, the hall was as grand as the grandest cathedral. Where is the stage? I asked Sander. There is none, only the floor.
Point blank.
Gog's moat, I murmured. We would not be set apart from our distinguished audience at all. Instead, we would be playing practically in their royal laps. It was fortunate that my entrance came well into the play, for I spent the first quarter hour of the performance in the jakes, emptying my stomach of what little supper I had been able to force down. Julia found me there and pulled me like a bulky sheep to the stage
Point pink, I
entrance.
know they're with me. Point
Wait,
blind.
wait, I whispered urgently.
Point yellow.
What is it? I can't recall my first line.
Whatever color you guys are.
Do you doubt
Joshua,
that?
keep that up.
She
Point
said.
blind and point.
What? That's your language. Do you doubt that? Oh. The cue line came to my ears. Chris Beeston took me by the arm and strode onto the stage with me in tow. Ah, well, I told myself, there's no turning back now. Sometimes in dreams, we do things we could never do in everyday life. The moment I stood before that glittering crowd of sumptuously dressed courtiers, I lapsed into a sort of dream. Through some miraculous process, I ceased to be Witch and became Ophelia. Except for some small part of myself that seemed to hover overhead, observing my transformation with amazement. The lines flowed from me as though they had just occurred to my brain and not been penned by Mr. Shakespeare a year earlier. The audience seemed vague and distant. Only when I had spoken my final line in the scene and swept off the stage did I come to myself again, to find Julia grasping my hands and fairly jumping up and down with delight. You were wonderful. You didn't miss a single word. I grinned back at her. I did so. I forgot to say, so please you, to Polonius.
Very top of
She
181.
gave me an exasperated shove.
Where's your finger?
You saw it, admit it. You were good, very good. I shrugged, embarrassed. And I owe it to you. I'm only sorry you couldn't do the part yourself. Her gaze fell. It can't be helped. Then she put on something of a smile again and pulled at my wig. You're all askew. Come sit down, I'll repair you. So, in the end, it was not courage that got me through. It was a trick of the mind. As I had survived my orphanage days by pretending I was someone else, someone whose parents still lived and were great and wealthy and would someday come for me, so I survived my hour or so up on the stage by pretending I was a wistful Danish girl driven mad by love. After the play, we were presented to the Queen and her court, and I was compelled to be witch again. What do I say? I whispered to Sander as we stood in line like soldiers awaiting inspection or execution. Don't say anything, Sander advised me. Just smile and bow and kiss her hand. I practiced my smile. It felt as though I had painted it on and the paint was cracking. By the time the Queen approached, my dry lips were stuck so fast to my teeth that I feared if I pressed my mouth to her hand, I would draw blood. Mr. Hemmings introduced each member of the company in turn.
Point pink.
Even had I not known the Queen's countenance from the likeness of her that hung in every inn and shop,
Go with
I could
me.
not have mistaken her.
Point.
Among all those elegant lords and ladies, she was the most elegant of all, in her bearing and in her appearance. She looked far too young and sprightly to have worn the crown for over 40 years. Or so I thought, seeing her at a distance. When she stood before me, her face not 3 feet from mine, I saw that the fair complexion was a layer of white paint, a ghastly mask, through which her age clearly showed, and the red hair the result of dye. When she smiled, her teeth were black with decay.
This is our Ophelia,
Mr. Hemmings was saying.
which has been with us but a few months.
I bowed quickly, as much to hide my shock as to do homage to her. She held out her gloved hand, and I tucked my lips to it. Now I thought she will move on. But to my horror, she spoke to me.
What sort of name is that?
Keep it up, Earl.
Pretend you're someone else, I told myself. Someone charming and witty,
That's
someone
how
whose
you earn those
voice
tickets from me,
works.
Earl.
It's a sort of nickname, Your Majesty, I said. And the voice certainly sounded like someone else's.
What is your Christian name then?
She spoke with kindness, and it seemed genuine interest. I don't ken. It's the only name I've got.
Well, witch, if you go on performing as admirably as you did for us, you'll make a name for yourself.
Thank you, Mum. I mean, Your Majesty. I bowed again, and when I came erect, she had moved on. That night in bed, the evening's events replayed themselves over and over in my head. In the space of a few hours, I had done more than transform temporarily into Ophelia. I had undergone a more dramatic change. From a shabby impostor, a thief, an orphan, who had been given a task far beyond his abilities, into a reliable, valued member of an acting company, who performed daily at the center of the universe. The Queen herself had said I would make a name for myself. A name. Yes. I needed a real name. I would not be plain witch any longer. I would be Pedringano. I said it aloud, grandly. Pedringano. Sandra stirred next to me. What? My name, I said, is Pedringano. He hit me with a pillow. Go to sleep, witch. We have the whole scenery first thing in the morning.
Look, Sam, boys, stop tracking up here. Getting in 3, 2, 1, and don't leave those two that look absolutely fantastic. Point on the table for my blue. Point on the table for my lime. Looking ready. They're not stretching. They're just sitting up all the way. They're looking ready for class right now. Point on the table for my pink. Point on the table for my yellow. Point on the table for red. Looking absolutely fantastic. You have 2 minutes on the clock to start your gist. 2 minutes on the clock starts now. Looking for those groups that are immediately getting those pencils to paper. Already, Jakai's putting that pencil to paper. Already, Mr. Quinton's putting that pencil to paper. I'm loving that focus. Okay, I think that's yours, actually. Put it on the spot. Put it on the table for red. 100% of pencils already moving. Loving that focus. Thinking about that, who that text is mostly about, what we mostly saw in this chapter. Point on the table for blue, 100% pencils moving. Sorry. What evidence do you have in the text that he's changing his name?
Excellent.
Also, remember, Devontae, big ideas are going to be those things that are repeated throughout the text. So go find your evidence for that and tell me if that's repeated. Don't call my name out.
Keep going.
So is that going to be a big idea that we need to include in the list? Okay. So cross that out. Think about what's the big repeated idea in the section about that.
You have 30 seconds left.
Pause for 1 second. Track me.
Track you.
Pencil should stop just like Donisha, just like Samaj. As I'm walking around, I'm noticing that a lot of us are focusing on small details. We want our gist to be those big repeated things, Jabri, that are mentioned multiple times. Awesome, have your eyes now. So if you go back through, I'm putting an extra minute on the clock. If your gist has a small detail that was only repeated once, we know that that's not our big important thing. There's a minute left on the clock, go.
is it about how he was not a Christian? Is that a small detail or is that a repeated idea?
I'm talking about like how you tried to change his name.
Write that. Go. Just write exactly what you told me. Good. What happened because he did that? You have 30 seconds left. Make sure you explain why he does this thing in the chapter.
Christian, make you quiet. You need to wait for me to speak, okay? 10 more seconds.
Is this the most important thing that happened in the chapter? No. What's the most important thing that happened in the chapter?
Pencil down, boys. Stop talking up here. Getting there in 3, 2, 1, and done. Michael, let me put that pencil down looking for other groups that immediately got there. Blue team, point for you. Point for my red team. Immediately putting those pencils down. I need you to hustle. Don't hold the team down for me here.
Which?
I know you have a lot to say, but I need to
Where is he
put it on the
performing?
table for yellow. Point on the table for my orange.
Add
Point
that.
on the table for my pink.
Add that.
What was this chapter mostly about? Let's start with who. Who is our big thing? Wage. What is Wage mostly doing in this chapter of our text? Miss Monisha turning and tracking. Monisha, I love that I already see Destiny and Samaj sending their energy and Mr. Kai.
Which is trying to perform Elizabeth, and he said he's gonna make up a name for Queen Elizabeth so he could perform.
What do you mean? Go back to that part. So let's break it down into 2 parts. So first you said he's putting on the play for Queen Elizabeth. Do we agree or disagree that this is a big idea? Agree. This is something that we see repeated throughout the text. Monisha, what was the second part of things that you shared? I love that Destiny's still tracking and sending that energy. Okay, so we want to think about the big repeated ideas. It's talking about making a name for himself. Is that a small detail or is that something that's repeated throughout the text?
A small detail.
Always focus on those big repeated ideas. How is Witch feeling when he's putting on this performance? How is he feeling when he's putting on this performance? Turning and tracking Michael. Love that orange team's already tracking. Point for orange team.
He's feeling good about himself because when he got on stage, he had a dream about the play and he got all his lines right.
Okay, so that's absolutely correct, Michael. Afterwards, how does he feel leading up to putting on the play? Let's focus on that part right there. How does he feel leading up? Only telling people who are sitting up all the way in the chair. Miss Destiny, go. How does he feel leading up to the performance of the play? What evidence do we have, and I wouldn't expect to see evidence in your gist, but what evidence do we have that supports this idea that he's feeling nervous? Quentin, what happens that makes him feel nervous? Turning and tracking Quentin, Omar's already sending that energy. Loud and proud, Quentin.
What happens that makes him feel nervous is that he has to practice, play for the queen again.
Sorry, can you say it again, Quentin?
He like has to perform for the queen again and stuff.
Where do you have evidence that he's performing again?
When she sings.
What happens? So we know we get character feelings and traits by paying attention to what the characters are. So what's something that we see Witch saying, thinking, or doing in this section of our text that makes us believe that he is nervous? Mr. Bree, go.
He was hot and Julie had to pull him out. Had to pull him out his highest side because he was nervous.
He had to do what?
She had to pull him out his highest side because he was nervous.
Okay, what else do we see? Destiny.
Also said, George said, empty my stomach of what little supper I have been able to voice now.
Right, we snapped our team over the golf clap like Samaj does. He threw up his food. Does that mean that he's nervous?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. You have 30 seconds to add anything into your gist that you may have missed from our conversation. I should immediately see teams updating. I see Jakai is updating her gist. You have 25 seconds left on the clock.